Your house makes noises. You know that. You learned them all in the first month you lived there. The pipe that knocks, the step that creaks, the fridge that clicks on at night. And after a while, you stop hearing them at all, because your brain files them under the house and moves on. Which means, if something else started making a noise in there, you might not notice for a very long time. Welcome back to Vespertine. 3 stories tonight about people who found out they had never actually been alone. Here we go. The police found a mattress up there. A real one, folded in half to get it through the hatch. There was a phone charger and a water bottle and a hole cut in the vent so he could see my bed. And the thing I keep coming back to is that he had been up there long enough to get comfortable. I rented a little house by myself when I was 26. First place I ever had that was just mine. No roommates, no boyfriend, nobody. And I loved it. That's important. I want you to know that I loved that house because of how it ended. It was old, and it was cheap, and it had one of those pull-down attic hatches in the hallway ceiling with the folding ladder. I opened it once when I moved in. I stuck my head up, saw insulation and dark, and I closed it, and I never thought about it again. Why would you? The first thing was the food. I'd noticed things were gone. Not a lot, that's the whole problem. Half a loaf of bread, some cheese slices, a yogurt, and every single time I had a perfectly good explanation because I am a person who eats things and then forgets that I ate them. I'd stand there in front of the fridge going, "Did I finish that? I must have finished that." Then it was things moving. My hairbrush ended up in the bathroom drawer when I always left it on the counter. A kitchen chair was pulled out. My charger was on the other side of the bed, and again, I lived alone. There's nobody to blame but yourself, so you just decide you did it. You start to think of yourself as a scatterbrained person. I actually said that out loud to my sister once. I said, "I think I'm losing it a little bit." The noises I explained away too. It was an old house. Old houses settle, and it was always at night, always above me, and it was always the same thing. A soft weight shifting, like somebody turning over in their sleep. I want to be honest about how long this went on. It was about 5 months. What finally made me do something wasn't fear. It was that I got annoyed at myself. I thought I was going crazy, and I wanted to prove I wasn't, so I set my old phone up on the bookshelf pointed at the hallway, and I left it recording all night. Not because I thought there was a person, because I thought I was sleepwalking. That was my actual theory. I thought I was getting up in my sleep and eating cheese slices. I watched it in the morning with my coffee, skipping through on fast forward. At 3 in the morning, the attic hatch opened. It didn't drop. That's what I remember. It came down slow, in stages, like somebody was lowering it with 2 hands and being careful about the noise. And then a leg came down. And then a man climbed down my hallway ladder, and he folded the ladder back up, and he pushed the hatch closed, and he stood in my hallway for a second and stretched. And then he walked into my kitchen and made himself a sandwich. I watched him eat it standing at my counter. He washed the plate. He put the plate back in the cupboard. And then he went to my bedroom door and he stood there. And he looked in at me sleeping for, I timed it later, 4 minutes. And then he went back up the ladder and he pulled the hatch shut. I was still in the house when I watched this. That's the part people don't get. I was sitting on my own couch, drinking coffee, and he was above my head. I did not scream, and I did not run. I got up very normally, like I was going out to my car for something, and I walked out the front door in my socks, and I got in the car, and I drove to the end of the street. And then I called the police from there. They took it seriously, which I'm grateful for. 2 of them went up with flashlights, and he wasn't there. He must have gone out during the day, whatever his routine was. But the mattress was there, the charger, the water bottle, a bag of my clothes, which I would rather not talk about, and a hole in the return vent right above my bed, big enough to look through, with a little dust rubbed away at the edges where somebody's hands had held on. They never caught him. There wasn't anything to catch. No fingerprints in the system, nothing on the tape but a man in a hood who could have been anybody. The theory was that he'd known the house before I did, that he'd maybe been up there before I ever moved in, and I just came along and started buying groceries. I moved out that week. My sister came and got my stuff. I wouldn't go back in. And here's the thing I actually think about at night, still. Not the mattress, not the vent. For 5 months, I thought I was losing my mind. I apologized to my own sister for being scatterbrained. And the whole time, I was the only sane person in that house. I just happened to be wrong about how many people were in it. Somebody lives in that house now. I drove past it once. The light was on. My daughter was 3, and for about a month, she kept telling me about the other mommy, the one who came at night and sat on the end of her bed. And I did what every parent does. I told her it was a dream. And then I put a camera in her room, and I found out she was not the one who was confused. We had a baby monitor in my daughter's room, one of those cheap ones with the 2-way button and a little screen. She was 3, she'd just moved out of the crib into a real bed, and I was the kind of tired where you sleep with the monitor next to your face. It started with her talking at night, which is normal. Kids talk at night. They talk to themselves, they talk to stuffed animals. I'd hear her over the monitor going on in that little voice, and I'd think, oh, she's chatting, and I'd go back to sleep. But the thing that started to catch me, and it took weeks, was that she'd pause. She'd say something, and then there'd be a gap, and then she'd answer, like a phone call. And I told myself she was doing both sides of it herself, the way kids do. Except I never heard the other side. I only ever heard the pauses. Then she started talking about the other mommy at breakfast. Very casual. That's what got me. She wasn't scared. She wasn't upset. She said it the way she'd tell me about a cartoon. The other mommy came. The other mommy sat on the bed. The other mommy has cold hands. And I did what you do. I said, "That was a dream, sweetheart." And she said, "Okay." She wasn't invested in convincing me. That's the part that should have scared me sooner. She wasn't trying to make me believe it, because to her, it wasn't remarkable. I asked her once what the other mommy looked like, and she said, "Like you, but she doesn't finish." I have thought about that sentence for 11 years, and I still don't know what it means. And I have decided I don't want to. So I set up a camera, just a little one, on the dresser, pointed at the bed. Nothing happened for 3 nights. And I remember feeling embarrassed on the 4th day, scrolling through like, what am I doing? What did I think I was going to find? The 4th night, at about 2 in the morning, my daughter sat up. She wasn't asleep. She sat up like somebody had come in, and she looked at the end of the bed, and she smiled, and she said, "Hi." And then she had a whole conversation, with pauses, looking at a specific spot, moving her eyes a little like she was following a face. And there was nothing there. I want to be really clear about that. There was nothing on that camera except my kid, sitting up in bed, talking to the end of her own mattress for about 6 minutes, and then lying down and going back to sleep. Which, okay, that's a kid with an imaginary friend. I could live with that. I almost did. Except at the very end of the clip, just before she lay down, she said, "Okay." And then she scooted over. She moved to one side of the bed, like she was making room. And the mattress went down. You can see it. It's not dramatic. It's not a hand or a face or anything you could put on the internet. It's a dip. The corner of the mattress went down like weight went onto it and stayed there. And my daughter went to sleep next to it. And about 40 minutes later, it came back up. I slept in her room after that, every night, on the floor for 2 weeks. And nothing happened. which people always find comforting when I tell them, and I never did. Because on the last night in that house, I was lying on the floor next to her bed at about 3 in the morning, and the monitor was still on the dresser, and the monitor picked up breathing. Slow, calm breathing, close to the mic. Not my daughter. She was above me, and I could hear her, and it wasn't her rhythm. And not me. We moved. My husband didn't fight me on it, which I think tells you what he thought about the whole thing, even though he never said it out loud. Not once. Not in 11 years. My daughter's 14 now. She doesn't remember any of it. She thinks the whole thing is a family story we tell, and I let her think that. And I've never shown her the video. There's a family in that house now. I know because I looked it up, which I shouldn't have done. They've got a little one. I saw the window with the little curtains. And I hope she's just a kid who talks at night. The hallway was 4 feet shorter on the inside than it was on the outside. I measured it 11 times because I thought I was doing the math wrong, and when I finally cut through the wall, there was a room in there. And somebody had been living in it. And there was a hole in the plaster at exactly the height of my armchair. I bought a house in my 40s. First house I ever owned, and it was old, 1920s, one of those places with too many small rooms and a hallway down the middle. And I'm a boring man, so the first thing I did was measure everything, because I wanted to put in shelves. And the numbers didn't work. The hallway outside, from the front of the house to the back, was about 4 feet longer than the hallway inside. And look, old houses are crooked, nothing square, walls are thick, I know. I redid the measurement probably 11 times over about 2 weeks, and every time I told myself I'd measured from the wrong point, and every time it was 4 feet. So I went and found the original plans. The city had them on file, which I did not expect, and I sat in an office and looked at a drawing of my house from 1924. And there was a room on the plan that was not in my house. Small, off the hallway, between the living room and the back bedroom, exactly where my 4 feet had gone. On the plan, it didn't have a label. Every other room had a label. I found the door about an hour after I got home. It was under wallpaper. You couldn't see it, but when I pushed on the wall in the right place, it gave. Somebody had papered straight over a door frame, and when I got the paper off, there was a little door, maybe 4 feet high, painted the same color as the wall. It wasn't locked. I want to tell you I called somebody first. I didn't. I opened it. It was a room about the size of a large closet, and it was pitch dark, and it smelled like a person. That's the thing I couldn't explain to anybody afterwards. Not like a dead thing, I know what people assume. It smelled lived in. It smelled the way a room smells when somebody's been sleeping in it. There was a mattress on the floor, blankets folded, some cans stacked neatly in a corner, a jar, newspapers going back. The oldest one I found was from the 90s, and there was a hole in the wall, about chest height on a sitting person, punched through the plaster and worn smooth around the edges. I went back out into my living room, and I looked at the wall from the other side, and the hole came out behind a bookcase that had been in the house when I bought it. And it looked directly at my armchair. That's the one. That's the one that gets me. Not the mattress, not the cans. The fact that whoever cut that hole chose that spot. They cut it to watch a chair. And the chair was already there. I called the police and they came, and they were honestly not that shocked. The officer told me they get these a couple times a year, mostly in old houses that have been rentals. Somebody finds a way in, and they stay, and nobody notices. He said the word frogging like I was supposed to know it. I didn't. They took the newspapers and some of the cans. Nothing came of it. There were no prints they could use and no crime they could name because whoever it was hadn't been in there for a while. The papers were old, the food was old, the dust was thick. And then I did the research I probably shouldn't have done. And I found out the man who owned my house in the 90s had been reported missing. Not dead, missing. He just stopped. No investigation, no suspects, nothing. He was old and he lived alone, and one day the mail piled up and the house got sold at auction, and it got rented for 20 years, and then I bought it. So here's my ending, and I'll be honest with you that it isn't one. I plastered the door over. I did it myself, badly, in one afternoon, and then I put a bookcase in front of it, and I lived in that house for 9 more years, and I never opened it again. I know how that sounds. Everybody asks why I didn't move, and the honest answer is that I liked the house, and I'd bought it, and I'm a practical man, and there was nothing in that room. It was an empty room. I'd seen it. There was nothing in it. But some nights, sitting in that chair, the same chair, I never even moved the chair, I'd catch myself listening at the wall, and I never heard anything. 9 years, not one sound. I just never stopped listening. That's 3. And I know what you're doing right now because I did it too when I first read these. You're running through your own house in your head. The attic you've never been in. The crawl space. The cupboard under the stairs that's a funny shape. If you've got one of these, put it in the comments. I read all of them. Sleep well, if you can.